Strippers bankrupt a restaurant. This story was sent in by Jill, and at the time this story takes place, Jill was working for a privately owned restaurant in southern Georgia. Jill said that this restaurant she was working at was a local favorite, and they stayed busy all the time. That was until COVID hit, and just like every other restaurant in the country, their business was suffering. The owner didn't want to give up on this restaurant, so he actually applied for a bunch of relief programs in order to get money. He wanted to still be able to give hours to his staff members, but also pay the bills and keep the lights on. And another move the owner made is he wanted to bring in a new general manager, and this general manager's name was Brad. Brad had a lot of experience and had been in the restaurant business for a couple of decades. So the owner thought, hey, what better way to get my restaurant back on track and use these government funds is to bring on a seasoned vet and have him run my place for me. Jill said her and all the workers were happy that the owner was able to secure these government programs in order for them to stay open. They were also equally excited that a new general manager was taking over, and they were looking forward to what was going to happen. Jill also said that everyone seemed to like Brad, at least for the first month. Jill said it was apparent that Brad had some vices. She said there was a lot of times that Brad would never even show up to work. And when he did show up, it looked like that he had been drinking and partying all night, and he would just be in the office with his head down on the table. She also stated that Brad would never help when they did get busy and needed help putting food out of the kitchen, or servers needed help at the door. Brad was nowhere to be found. He was a pretty hands-off guy. Jill said that wasn't the worst of it. They all of a sudden started running out of product. She said that they would get a produce truck from the local produce company at least 3 times a week, and sometimes they wouldn't even come and deliver at all. And of course, she said the customers would be upset and mad that certain menu items weren't available because they didn't have produce for it. They would ask Brad what was going on with produce, and Brad would make up all kinds of excuses like, oh, they missed our order. Oh, they ran out. Oh, it was bad. I had to send it back. But Jill said those excuses only worked a couple of times, and there was grumbling amongst the staff is that Brad was just not spending the money for them to get the product in the door. Jill also said other things started falling through the cracks, like they needed new menus printed out and made. They used to have beautiful laminated menus that was colorful and trifold, and they got worn out, and instead of going and purchasing more to be made, Brad literally printed the menu off on regular standard printer paper and was passing it out to customers. Jill says she's been in the restaurant enough to know that you have to manage the money and funds, but this is like on a whole nother level of being cheap. Despite the restaurant getting those government funds, they were still operating like they weren't getting any money at all. Jill said it just kept getting progressively worse, and it got to the point to where near the last 2 days of the week, they were like taking off half their menu because they didn't have the products to make the items. And it was apparent to everybody that Brad was a worse pandemic than COVID. Jill said they lost a lot of regulars, and some of the regulars that personally knew the owner started complaining to the owner enough that the owner started looking into these things. Because the owner had been pretty hands off after hiring Brad, because Brad had all this great accomplishments on his resume and even come recommended by another person that the owner knew as a great manager. So the owner looked at this opportunity like, I can step away and just let Brad run it. But that was a mistake. Jill said that once the owner started digging in, he realized that the $300,000 that he had gotten from the government in order to pay his employees and keep the restaurant open, Brad had squandered all of that money in 11 months. And he wasn't even using any of that money to help the restaurant. Brad spent $300,000 going to strip clubs. By the time the owner found all this stuff out, it was already too late. The restaurant was behind, like on rent, like 3 months. It was behind on the electric bill by 2 months. It was behind on all kinds of payments for the vendors, the produce trucks, the food trucks. The reasons they weren't delivering is because Brad stopped paying the invoices. So all these invoices just piled up, and Brad wasn't paying any of it. Of course, Brad did get fired, but the owner actually took all this stuff to the police and Brad was arrested and eventually charged for wire fraud. But sadly, Jill says the restaurant could not stay open. The owner actually called a meeting for all the employees right after Brad was terminated to thank them for their service and let them know that he was no longer able to keep this restaurant open.